Yes, it's me, the Kid JB. For those that know me from the Bucket Up podcast to broadcasting football to reviewing Bloody Marys, after too many strangers telling me, you're funny, you should have your own show, I'm doing just that. Welcome to my digital sandbox, the I Don't Know Show. Hey guys, it's me, Jesse Burke. I like long walks on the beach and podcasts and stuff. Hey, just kidding. It's me, the Kid JB, a.k.a. the Bloody Mary Bro, one half the Bucket Hat Boys, Uncle Jesse, and so on and so forth. Jessel, if you ask my grandma. Shouts to you, grandma. Let me guess. You got a podcast. Was kind of the tone a couple years ago. But we're evolving. We're growing. That's what this show is about. That's what this world's about. Oh, you don't have a podcast? Why not? That's the energy. That's the new tone we're going with. What are podcasts? Shortly, it's like a long-winded, manifested, curated episode of production done by people in a pod. They're a cast, It's fun. Podcast evolved from at first being like this exclusive group of people that, oh, wow, this person has a podcast. This is a podcast. To now everybody having a podcast, which is good because things evolve. And I think that they could be all spun positively. So podcasts used to be, like I said, exclusive. Now it's more of a community-based thing. And we'll talk about it because I think podcasts have now made their way into the meet and greet of society that is, an email signature, a business card, a website, a little bio, a book. That. A podcast is another avenue for people to get to know you. We all have a story. We all have social media. We all have things we like to talk about. So a podcast is a way for you to let those things out, may it be on specific topics or an open forum. I'm going to talk about the ins and outs and a little bit of why you should start one and how to start one. Because if we're talking numbers, I think I've done easily over 300 podcasts on the low end, 300 to 400. So I can say I know a thing or two when it comes to doing one. Podcasting now is kind of like exercising. You see somebody with muscles or in shape, it's not a thing of, oh, I wish I had that. They're the only ones that can. It's, oh, I want that and I can have it. So just like everybody can exercise and go to the gym and create a better fitness world for themselves, they can create production for themselves. Creativity, videography, cinematography, photography, all the good stuff, all the ographies, you know what I'm saying? I think things have evolved in the sense of similar to, making a website. Businesses have their employees, their business model, what they do. They have a desire to have clients and people spend money with these brands and make them bigger to continue to make more money and stuff. You've seen these pursuits with advertisements in a newspaper, commercials on radios, commercials on TVs, ads on flyers, and so on. It's community outreach. It's reaching an audience, people, just the masses, more potential clients, conversions, leads, whatever you want to call it. A podcast now is simply that. It's an additional platform for you to give out what you have going on. It doesn't always have to be a business venture. As you know, there's fitness podcasts, there's murder podcasts, there's everything under the sun. So I think whatever you got going on, you have that evolve in your life anyway. You probably have an email. You have an email signature. You have a template of what you do for work. You have a resume that talks about the things you've done from a work standpoint. The podcast will allow you to let this information be unraveled naturally and a little bit more of a request than you providing it to people and constantly feel like you're pushing information out. So getting to that, man, I feel like a podcast, like I was saying, first started off by being like, oh, let me guess, you have a podcast. But now it's, yeah, I do drywall. I do construction. I do bodybuilding. If you want to learn more, check out my podcast. It's an evolving news. Sign up for my newsletter. Sign up, email me, call me, text me. It's just another avenue. We all have social media. We all have a phone. We're trying to grow in this world. So oftentimes I've been approached. It's kind of cool to say that now I, got some skin in the game, and people know kind of I'm a podcaster, Goal is full time, but right now it's part time. People always say a lot of kind of canned things, like, I've always wanted to start one. I don't have the time. I wish I knew how. I think I would be good at that. You should have me on your podcast. Those are the 5 things I hear often. And all those things are obtainable. But it's all based on what you want to do, right? So some of the podcasting tips I am going to provide, because I have experience in the business side of things, as this is a outward business adventure for businesses to jump on and show their worth as well. It is also an entertainment platform, because we have entertainment, music outlets for, say, my producer, Bill, and my guy, King Diego, who's on the beat. There's constant avenues. Now, when you're starting a podcast, man, I feel like a lot of people get caught up in some of these things that prevent them from starting. They get held up on too much of a structure. I often hear people come up with these ideas of podcasts and never execute them. So they'll say things like, oh, I'm going to start a podcast where we're going to drink, and every time somebody says a funny word, we're going to have to do a shot. And if we're going to find out how drunk you get. And then what happens is you're too stuck to that idea, and it never pans out. Or people get caught up on, my relationship with my boyfriend is so wacky, so we're going to talk about our wacky stories. And you find out that the stories are not that wacky, or they're not that groundbreaking. So with that, just start, man. Like I said, everyone's got a voice. Everyone's got a story to talk about. Everyone's got things they want to talk about. Get it out there. And let the kind of structure form itself. I can even say when I first started podcasting, I had this idea of being like this reactionary funny guy that every time I say something, it's going to be this wild thing. And, I'm going to always be this outspoken, opinionated dude, which, I still am, but I've wrapped it around in a different style. And it just didn't work for me. I was catching a lot of negativity on the internet, a lot of hate, and I was feeling like I was doing something I wasn't, right? So like I speak to the authenticity, do something that's real to you. If you work out, talk about your fitness journey. If you are working for a unique company, you work for a big network or something, talk about the ins and outs. You have a new face product that you like to use, talk about the product, man. Get into your skin game routine and all that stuff. There's always something to be talked about, and there's always something that people want to listen to. So you would never know who could listen to you, because I'll tell you what, man, when I watch YouTube, it's all random. I watch anything from a carpet cleaning video to a dad that reunites with his son for after 10 years, and it's all of these different people posting this content, right? They put it out there, so they're creating. Let the audience get to know you. I know oftentimes, in any groups of friends or any type of walks of life, there's like these types of people, right? You got your funny, goofy guy. You got the stern businessman. You have the know-it-all, spiritual person. Let that form naturally. Don't come into your podcast being like, all right, you ready for something? I'm this. Because then you're kind of a character instead of being yourself. And you're doing more of a post-production type of specialty production more than the actual podcast. I feel like the podcast should be more of just like the open door policy you hear about in jobs, where you can just talk to your boss whenever you want. That's what the podcast is. There's constant access to this person. Not constant, but more. let the podcast be authentic, man. I feel oftentimes podcasts, it's kind of back to when I talked about putting LOL on your own social media post or laughing at your own jokes. You're kind of trying to create this reaction that you're expecting. So if you go in saying, oh, we're going to do this podcast and we're going to say a controversial thing every 10 minutes, hoping that what you're saying is going to cause controversy, and B, that's going to be your identity. Oh, people are going to know us from controversial things, which is not the case. People find interest in things for their own reasons. So I've had people tell me and my co-host, shouts to DJ Buttersauce, my boy Ty Doyle, the Bucket Hat Boys. I've had people tell us, like, it's really funny when Jesse tells a joke and Ty's not rocking with it. And Ty will tell Jesse why it's a bad joke. And that's authentic. We don't go into the show talking about, all right, I'm going to tell you a joke and you just let me know when it's not good. And then we'll just work off that. We just talk and we're naturally podcasting. And then those moments are created. Setups, equipment, technology, all that stuff, it's good. But don't get caught up with it. I remember somebody reached out to me and asking me about starting the podcast, and they told me how they spent $1,000 on equipment before they recorded one episode. They spent $1,000 on equipment. They started naming RSS cables and this and that and the other thing, as if like the more confusing their setup was, the better the podcast, which is the opposite, man. You need a camera and you need yourself, maybe some lights, or you could shoot during the day. You got the sun. But no, man, keep it simple. What you're talking about should be natural, So the production, the episodes, they should be natural. And this is all coming from a space where I've grown into this, I now look back on my older episodes and cringe, but that's part of the process. The process that you don't know you're in until you're in it. We're on the greater half of, or greater mark of episode 20. We're approaching episode 20 of this show. And I thought of this in my head in the shower. You know what I'm saying? So you got to just build on it. I will say, reap what you sow kind of thing. I'm guilty of watching clips of bigger podcasts. I can honestly say I never watch a actual big time podcast. The Rogans, the Andrew Schultz, the Bradley Martins, all of these, I'm not there. But I'm watching their clips, right? So when it comes to the actual full production side of things, I'm watching people with followers like my size, right? Or people trying to build it up. That's how the community builds, There's this, saturation, sadly, with podcasts too, where there's people that are already famous, so they have an audience, are starting podcasts, and the audience is just, translating over there as well. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a little bit natural too, because, a football player starting a football podcast. Makes sense, right? Be authentic with it, just be who you are, not what you aspire to be. Don't be your ego. We don't need an ego podcast. When it comes to the mindset of, I don't know how to start, or I don't know if people would like it or what it is, that you're correct. You don't know, right? So just start it. That's my suggestion. I will say that when it comes to bigger productions, skits or, long-winded podcasts and stuff like that, obviously it's going to take a little bit more of a, thought out plan and, with a team and stuff like that. But I genuinely think the skits and these personality things should come in time, because like I was saying, the audience doesn't know what your personality is until you've kind of unraveled it a little bit. So let the episodes cook and use those episodes then to create little snippets of content that then bring people back to your audience or to your episodes and your podcast. Constantly, showing that the creative side of things is not just beholden to a set weekly podcast or, all these equipment and, tools and stuff like that. Let it be natural. Technology wise, again, There's so many apps that allow you to create podcasts. There's Google Meets, Google Hangouts, Zoom, production studios, cameras on your phone, all those things, man. Just create some content, post it and find out what works. Just like anything else, I'm sure when you started working out, when you started cooking, when you started dancing, whatever you started, it wasn't as good as what it is now. So just like anything else, bringing it back to the beginning, man, I will say that there was this negative ego shift of like, oh, let me guess, you have a podcast. And now we're working towards, oh, I would love to hear about that on your podcast. The expectation should be that someone has a podcast, not necessarily a structured podcast, but an avenue for continuous content, continuous insight to what is going on in your life and what you're trying to promote. There was a time where not everyone had a website, but if you're a business, you should have a website, right? If you're a business, you should have a podcast. You should have a social media account. You should have a media team, right? These are things that, and I don't say should like you need to, but I'm saying should as in if you see the big companies, they're the ones doing these things. So kind of makes sense. I do think that podcasting, outreaching, or, creative outlets are needed. We live in a time where people are just kind of strung out, stressed out. I feel like that's always the case. People want a way to get away from their 9-to-5 job or, what other situations they have that are kind of constraining them in life. Let the outlet be the podcast. Your kids are annoying you, talk about it on the pod. Work's getting annoying, talk about it on the pod. You don't know what's a good way to cook your new chicken with a new season you got, and you don't know what temperature to use, talk about it on the pod. As somebody that's constantly trying to grow his platform, been in the podcast space for 8 years now, 8 years and growing. I've built 3 to 4 different shows. Like I said, hundreds of episodes. Been on guests on other shows. Flown out. Shouts to Lance, Turned Up TV. Shouts to Roach Clip. Shouts to all these Ariel, ENT out in Colorado. Shouts to I'm from Denver. All these outward brands that, had us on there talking about what we had going on. Shouts to them because they had episode content for themselves. So it's always in the works, man. Getting to it. I do think that there was a time where websites were exclusive and people were like, wow, like you're a special brand if you have a website. There was a time where unique business cards were exclusive. There was a time where, a business model was unique and exclusive. But now we're in a world where everything's accessible. So I think the good thing about podcasts, it can make you stand in. I know oftentimes as a business, you want to stand out and separate yourself. But now you're trying to be more in tune with society. And as society shows, let me guess, you got a podcast? But I don't know. At the end of the day, I got a lot to say. But I don't know. I am the Kid JB. I do know that. This is the I Don't Know Show. I also know that. Tune in every week, every month as we continue to bring on guests, businesses, brands to continue to show their love, their space, and tell their story on my podcast because we should all have one. But again, I'm the Kid JV. You are the Buckets. This is the I Don't Know Show, and I'm out.